Here's what's happened. The boss of the UK's largest energy supplier has said the firms should be paying the 780,000 pensioners who no longer qualify for government payments but still need them. So all kinds of different measures, but these are people just above the poverty line. The Octopus founder Greg Jackson said being helpful to the government by replacing the support was best for Britain. Octopus has extended a £30 million support fund to offer thousands of £50, £100 and £200 credits to customers. The biggest energy suppliers made more than £8 billion in profits in 2023. Meanwhile, customer bills are set to rise by £149 a year this winter. What do you think, Emily?
Oh, I know. Look, it's great. This is capitalism in a good way, in that this company is saying, we made profit, we want to help our customers. And Greg Jackson, who founded Octopus, he's absolutely brilliant at his marketing. And it will be a brilliant marketing scheme. They're all about customer help. But at the bottom of this is an issue, was Labour right to make this fuel payment cut? Because for me,
that's not what we're discussing. But yeah,
but it is that is what's at the root of it. But that's that they decided to make that cut, and it was an entirely political move to save £1.5 billion. I can tell you, by the end of the period, if we've got through this fiasco, they will have made no savings on this whatsoever, because they're going to take and they're going to give some more. There's going to be all sorts of shenanigans. They're going to spend loads of money on marketing, trying to get people to. So I just think this was a bad political decision where they wanted to look tough and say they were making savings, but it's just a mess. It's a complete mess.
It's a big, it's like, a football game kicks off and you immediately get a striker run down the pitch and score in his own goal. It's an odd one for Labour to have walked into. But let's just discuss this thing of whether electricity firms should pay. Do you think they've got a duty to, Owen?
Well, I mean, I would increase taxes on these companies. I don't think it should be on a whim. I mean, there's this phrase which I love: charity is a grey, cold, loveless thing. If a rich man wants to help the poor, he should pay his taxes gladly, not dole out money at a whim. We shouldn't rely on the generosity of companies or individuals to help people out. The government exists to tax and then distribute that taxes in a way that's accountable to the electorate. That's known as democracy. So that's what I want. I'd bring these energy companies into public ownership, which probably isn't a surprise. But they're making these profits at a time when people are struggling in this country. It is one of the richest countries on earth. The problem is that wealth ends up concentrated in the hands of a few, not least through these shareholder dividends, including to energy companies. The idea at the moment, we're going to have 850,000 pensioners who are eligible for pension credit who don't get it. They're in poverty. They're now having their winter fuel allowance taken away. About 1.2 million pensioners just above that threshold who are struggling. They're also having it taken away. Labour, when they talk about tough decisions, they never say tough decisions that's about taxing energy companies. The tough decisions are always making poorer people poorer, taking the fight to vulnerable people rather than taking on vested interests.
Right,
real tough decision.
Maggie in Cumbria, hi. Hey, Maggie.
Hello.
So what do you think? Let's just go back to whether the fuel companies have a duty to pay when the government withdraws the money.
Well, I don't think there's any hope for that, because having a duty to pay, they have a duty to pay tax, which they don't pay. So they're not going to agree to do it. And the government, any government's not going to make them do it. The last government didn't make the water companies cough up for the disaster of poisoning all of our water. They're just allowed to carry on feeding the shareholders multi-millions.
We've just got to make sure we understand that there are the companies that get the oil out of the sea, and that's BP and Shell and whatnot, and there's all kinds of conversations about further windfall taxes on them. Then it's refined, and then it's supplied, and the suppliers, British Gas used to be called, Octopus is the new one. You might remember that when the gas prices rocketed, about 30 suppliers went out of business overnight because their margins were so tight. So it's not clear how much the suppliers are actually making. But Octopus are obviously doing well. And I'm just wondering whether you think it's right for them to pay.
Well, I think it's right that the bills should come down for everyone. Pensioners and people, millions living in poverty, below the poverty line. It's impossible for them to keep warm in the weather in England, especially in the north. We have 12 months of autumn and winter up here. Yeah. It's impossible.
Yeah, I
So,
know. It's
I don't-
freezing, yeah.
Yeah, and since COVID, bills have quadrupled, and we're just constantly hearing the excuse of Ukraine, wars here, wars there. I think it's all nonsense. It's total profiteering, greed.
Thank you, Maggie. But, well, I mean, that's from
But
the
she's
heart,
true.
isn't it?
She's right.
From the heart.
Well, yes and no. I think there is a concern, as you said. There were a lot of companies that went under. There is also the concern that if we try, and this is not being suggested, by the way, that these costs are going to be forced, as you say, raise taxes, is that some companies will then pass those measures on to those who are paying, the consumers. So there are a whole sort of series of. I come back to the fact that I don't understand why Labour felt they had to do this. We're talking about £1.5 billion. And I know that seems a lot of money, but actually in the scale of what we spend every year and borrow, is that, yes, there were some rich people who were getting this fuel allowance. It was a very small amount.
But also,
percentage terms,
Yeah, but you
compared
probably
to
agree
people
on,
who
you agree on
needed
this,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, well, you'd also what you can do with wealthy pensioners getting it is you just increase taxes on them, and that would just recoup the cost of the winter fuel payment without driving.
The so-called wealthy pensioners have paid the taxes in the first place, right? So they have a right to it, don't they?
What do you mean by that? Sorry, I don't see why a lot of pensioners have become.
Well, Alan Sugar has paid a lot of tax. Charlie Mullins has paid a lot of tax.
Right.
So his argument is he's got every right to a winter fuel allowance.
But you end up in a situation in this country where the wealth created by millions of people, the workers who keep these businesses ticking, gets sucked into the account of only the business owners. I don't think that's fair. And we can use that to make sure, for example, pensioners aren't driven into hardship.
Okay, Darren on Facebook says energy companies should be forced to become non-profit making organisations and not subsidise the government. Mark is on X, formerly Twitter, says the energy companies have been allowed to make unethical profits at our expense. Let their windfall tax pay the winter fuel allowance. So, yeah, it's that confusion of the oil, the drilling versus the selling. I'm amazed at how they've done this thing of forward paying. They don't want to suddenly land someone with a $2,000 bill in January. So they start to extract money from you the previous summer. So your heating's not on and you get, I had this, you're getting these massive bills. You're thinking, about what's going on? Of course, it's their smoothing thing. They're going to try and get the money in.
And also last winter was incredibly warm.
Yeah.
So we actually used up less of our bills than we thought.
Interesting.
But we could have a really cold winter this winter.
Yeah.
So I do understand why they're doing that, because if you had 3 months, it rained and it was warm last winter. It didn't stop raining, as we remember, for months and months. We might have a cold snap this winter, or not even a snap. It could last for 2 months. At that point, pensioners, it is a good idea.
But also 4,000 people died of cold in this country last year, and that is an extraordinary statistic in this rich.
It is. I mean, in the 70s when I grew up, the news every other day was about hypothermia. We had it the whole time. This is the old people who can't put the heating on and die of cold. But I thought that had come to an end.
But it hasn't. And it is absurd. We live in a country where energy companies make vast profits while people freeze to death in their homes. That's what I don't think a basic human need should be run for profit. It should be run, as someone suggested, that it should be nationalised and publicly run.
I think
yeah. Well, fair enough.
We'll say it again.
I mean,
but
in any case,
to go to the break. That's all.
Yeah, but we need to tax them more. Yeah, probably in the meantime.
We say everyone or just some people,
including you, Jeremy.
Yeah,
especially you, Jeremy.
Great. Okay, now he goes for it. Just as we're going into our break.